everyone, and welcome to a Modern Sales Pros event. I'm super excited to dive right into this exciting topic today. But first, I'd like to ask our two panelists a fun little icebreaker as we let folks trickle in. My fun icebreaker question of the day is, if you can be a kitchen appliance, what would you be and why? We can start with Allie.
So I would be my Ninja dual basket air fryer because it can air fry, reheat, bake, like it can do everything, and you can have two different temperatures going at once. And I used to own a deep fryer, which is like obviously not super healthy, but this air fryer is like life changing. I am obsessed with it, and so is my husband, and I never thought he would be. So that's what I would be.
Nice.
Yes, that is great. We were just talking backstage about how I do not have a Ninja and I cannot remember the air fryer that I have, but it is not as cool as a Ninja one. I think that if I was a kitchen appliance, I'd probably say Mocha Master because we just got one. It is a really old school looking but really nice coffee maker machine. There is a cult following for the Mocha Master. I am like noob on the coffee maturity scale very early on. But what I love about it is that like it gets you through the entire process of like grinding beans, smelling the ground beans, like does the pour over, and then you have a hot pot of coffee. And I just really like that entire flow. And it's really pretty to look at. So I'm not mad about it being on my kitchen counter.
Yours is so sophisticated, like coffee and like the process of enjoying it. And mine is like, I can reheat French fries that are soggy and they'll
Okay,
be
but
amazing.
reheating pizza in an air fryer is just
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so good.
Yours is way more practical. A lot more use cases than like one coffee in the morning.
I love it. It does says a lot about who you are. I love it. Well, let's get started. Super excited to talk about the fine line when AI enhances sales and when it's better left behind. But first, I'll say a few words about the team at Modern Sales Pros. Hello, everyone. My name is Angelica. I'm one of the community event managers at MSP. And for those of you who are not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. And our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they struggle to solve on their own and help them to see around corners they may not know about. We do this through live sessions like the one you're at today. We also have an online robust forum, and we also have a quarterly summit, which I will talk about on the next slide. And we're starting to get back into in-person events. So if you're not already a part of MSP, you'll be invited to join right after this event. And speaking of our summit, we have one next month on July 18th to 19th, Camp Modern Sales. We have about 15 plus events with about 3,000 modern sales pros in attendance, 35 high caliber speakers from, you can hear from leaders at SalesLoft, Outreach, Gainsight, Stage 2 Capital, plus so much more. So don't miss out and you can sign up today. I'll drop the link here and you can register. It's a free event and we hope to see you there. Now, I'm super pleased to talk about our sponsor for today's event, Endgame. I'm actually going to drop their link in the chat. Endgame is an awesome service that I'll actually pass off to Manami to talk a few words in her intro piece. And the housekeeping notes, just a reminder that this event is being recorded. So if you have a colleague or friend that couldn't make it, rest assured this event is being recorded. And if you have a question for our panels, please use the Q&A function at the top right-hand corner or in the chat, and do let us know where you're calling in from. And last but not least, I'm going to pass it off to our speakers to say a few words about themselves and their company. I'll kick things off with Miami to talk about herself as well as Endgame, and then I'll come back for closing remarks.
Cool. Hey, everyone. Excited to have this chat. I'm Manami. I lead growth at Endgame. We are a platform for sales teams. And so what we do is help connect product data with your CRM data so we can analyze it and serve it up to your sales team so they can have better insight into who best to reach out to for the biggest pipeline, best closing, etc. We do a lot of propensity scoring and AI modeling in the back end, which is why I'm excited to talk today with Allie about now this new world of AI we have here today. But if you have any questions about Endgame or anything like that, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn after. But yeah, over to you, Allie.
Thanks, Manami. I'm Allie Seibel, formerly Allie French. I was married last year, so still getting used to the name change. I'm the director of RevOps at Groove. We are a sales engagement platform that helps teams execute on their revenue strategy and drive success. We also have an AI function within our tool as well. And from a data perspective, it's Salesforce native, so it makes the Salesforce admins' dreams come true, which is why I joined the company, but also why I'm super excited to talk to Manami. We both have companies that have an AI skin in the game, and I think this topic is super relevant. So let's party.
Yeah. And then, Angelica, are you coming back for closing remarks, or can we get into it?
Let's get
I think
into
we'll get into it. All right, cool. So generally, we want this to be really casual. Please feel free to jump into the chat. Feel free to ask questions. We'll take them as we can. And if we don't see them, then just ask them again and we'll tap into it. We have some slides because we wanted to obviously bring some GIFs into this game. So let me just go ahead and present. And it works. It works. It works.
It works.
It works. Cool. All right. So today we're talking about AI in sales. But like, let's get real. Why are we here? Oprah. Oprah is the reason why we are all here today. I'm kidding.
It's one of her favorite things of this year, I'm pretty sure. AI and ChatGPT, you know?
Actually, she's just going to give away ChatGPT as like, what is her like annual present or whatever underneath the chairs. But yeah, I mean, if you are living under a rock, then you don't know ChatGPT exists. But if you are in the world at all, then obviously ChatGPT was released, I think last fall officially, but really took off this year. And it's really, I think, stirred up an insane conversation, especially in the B2B space about how do we use AI? How do we use it to drive productivity? When and why and how? So excited to get into it. When we were prepping for this call, we saw an interesting stat that said that ChatGPT reached 100 million users in 2 months, which is insane. The closest other software to that was TikTok at 9 months. And I am still fighting downloading TikTok. And so that just gives you a scale of like how widespread ChatGPT is. There you go. All right. I think also just helpful to understand a little bit of like how and why AI has come up with such a fury in the last couple of months versus what's been happening the last, I'd say, 10 years. Because AI is not new. Machine learning is not new. So what's changed now that makes it so relevant? And so what we've been working with the last couple of years in the traditional machine learning space, I think for sales, has been around machine learning, deep learning, propensity scoring, and what that focuses on in producing like quantitative outputs. So doing analysis, scores, numbers, and we use it in sales for predictive scoring, sentiment analysis, things that, Endgame does, things that people build into their own tools. But the hard part is that it requires a lot of technical and analytical resourcing to do it. And I think what's now changed is with ChatGPT, there's a new way of what's called generative AI, and that focuses on text, image, video output. And that opens up a whole bunch of use cases that we'll go into next across all of sales. And the best part about it is you don't need technical skills to interact with it and use it and take advantage of it. And that comes with a lot of pros and cons. But if you are trying to understand like what the heck changed in AI in the last couple months that has made this wave happen, it is the introduction of generative AI. And so if you wanted to go down a learning path, that's the thing to Google.
And I think that's super important to like emphasize that AI is not new in most of the tools that like we use and talk about, like even at Groove and Endgame, like we're not introducing AI for the first time in our platforms. We're introducing a different kind of it and doing something different with it. And I mean, I'm thinking of the tech stack we use, and I think every single platform has some form of traditional machine learning or AI in it. And now they're introducing the new stuff. And I think you and I both took the same like quick course on Google on like how to tell the or understanding the difference between the two, which was super helpful for me because it is a beast. So anyone out in the audience, if you're like still confused about the difference between the two and the levels of AI, like there are resources out there that can simplify it in a way that I think anyone can understand. And that really kind of helped me in preparation for this and just for like preparation for all the platforms out there introducing something new.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like I was back in school when this all happened because I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I feel like I need to learn something new just so I can be, up with the world. And so I can link also the Google course. It's free that we both took in the slides as we share them afterwards. But let's get into it. So the first topic that we want to cover is what are the use cases for AI in sales and what's really opened up now in the last couple months. And so we took a stab at outlining what I would say is probably like the most common ones we hear about, but I'd be really interested if you guys are already doing something with AI in sales that's not on here, throw that in the chat. What I thought was interesting as we were talking through all these use cases is there's such a varied level of impact, whether you're thinking about individual impact to business level impact, and then also does that impact face the customer or is it internal? And so with generative AI, I think what that's really opened up is a whole bunch of use cases that really help rep level, RevOps level, IC level, like automation and productivity that previously traditional machine learning didn't really help because it was so much focused on the business internal facing use
Yep.
cases.
Yeah. And I think for use cases specifically, if we're thinking of like, how can X, Y, and Z help my sales reps or my CX team or whatever, I try to think of, okay, what is the stuff that like isn't their job or isn't something that they're pumped about? Like, I didn't become an SDR 6 years ago because I was super good at writing emails. Like, I'm not a copywriter, but I spent a lot of time drafting emails because it just wasn't my forte. Or like sales reps, for all the people in the back, don't love updating Salesforce, right? So taking the stuff that they don't love to do or is time consuming and trying to introduce AI into that to help them focus on the stuff that they want to do, sell more, follow up better, do more account research, whatever it may be, become a Salesforce admin on the side because it'll help them with their job. Like it opens up the opportunities for them to do more of what they love and less of what they don't love. And I think the individual impact, like you've highlighted here on the slide, is like super important to understand for this level of AI that's being introduced.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is like as you take apart use cases and use cases and use cases and you get deeper into the AI hole, there's so much you can do with it. But the power, I think, is really in how you hook up all these use cases together to solve the mundane parts for sales. And so what you said, like, right, sales doesn't exist to do Salesforce data entry. Maybe one of the least favorite parts of their job. If you're a sales rep, you can tell me in the chat what's your least favorite part of the job. But I think one of the things that's been really exciting for me is I'm more on the marketing side with Endgame. And so for me, when I think about the call summarization, that's exciting for me, not because of just what Gong will do within Gong, or Zoom is also starting to do this. If you check out like recordings in Zoom, they do summaries. What's really exciting for me is the idea of like it already being summarized with AI and then creating an automation. So like a call summary is then hooked into Salesforce and stamped on like a call activity. So if I am just trying to get up to speed with what's going on in an account, I can just look at a Salesforce account and the activity and then get a sense of like what happened on the call by seeing the call summary instead of like having to click into the link of the Gong recording, listen to it, and then make my own opinion. And so there's so much time savings that can be had if you think about all these use cases and tying them together internally for like not just sales, but also other people that you work with.
And I think there's also like a level beyond that. And, I maybe work for a company that is introducing this is like not just the summary of the meeting, but also pre-generating an email that all that rep has to do is like proofread it. But it's really important that they still proofread it so that they can add their own personal flair. And even that, taking the meeting summary is one thing, but going the next step and saying the email is already typed up, it just needs some finessing is also a time saver. So I think those two key pieces, because I used to spend a lot of time before I got into RevOps listening to other people's calls and trying to understand like their like key things that they said or things that the person we were selling to was saying. And this is just so, even 6 years ago when I was an SDR, things have come so far. And I think it's just like so cool.
Yeah. And we'll talk about like, as Ali mentioned, there's definitely human intervention that still needs to exist with AI. But I think that what generative AI, ChatGPT, and everything has opened up is all these orange boxes. There's just so much more automation that we can bring into our day-to-day lives and for the lives of reps. I think the traditional ML use cases that are in the purple on this, like the predictive scoring, like forecasting, pricing optimization is an interesting thing. Obviously, there's a lot of data analysis that's involved. There's a lot of like machine learning models, et cetera, that need to be built specific to your company. Still really important, but I think still requires strong RevOps, strong data people, strong analytical people to help support it. And so maybe an area that's not going to be as easy for a sales team or a rep to just pick up and go.
And I think the concept of like crawl, walk, run, which I try to do in like all the things that I introduce at companies I work at, is still important here, because there are, I mean, I still know sales reps from my previous orgs who are spreadsheet people. Like when they're old school guys, like they were always spreadsheet people. Introducing a CRM was something they weren't super jacked about. Now they're okay with the CRM. So it's like, we have to understand that not everyone's going to be as excited as maybe we are about this. So introducing it in a crawl, walk, run way, I think is really going to be helpful. So you're not just shoving it down people's throats when maybe they're not ready for the whole picture. Like taking pieces of what's possible, I think is really important, because otherwise you're not going to have adoption, and you're going to be back to, you know, just change management constantly to get people excited about this.
Yeah. And I think what will be, I think adoption will probably hit as more and more of the day-to-day sales tools like Groove, et cetera, Gong, bring more of this AI into their tool itself. Because right now, like a rep could go to ChatGPT, like do a lot of work to do personalizing emails or call summarization, et cetera. But the more that tools just start building in these features and we can just glob onto it based off of our day-to-day workflow already, I think adoption will just go up naturally, because we don't have to change what we do day to day if it's already in the tool that we use.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I didn't even think about like, okay, going to ChatGPT to do account research. If like, I mean, I don't think Salesforce would ever do this, but like building it in, because right now on their homepage, you can have like news about the accounts that are in your name, right? But like the deeper level of like, give me the top execs at this company, or like the top acquisitions of the 100 B2B tech, you know, whatever that may be, and getting it real specific in ChatGPT, but not having to go to ChatGPT to do that would be super awesome.
I think that like my bet is the next 3 to 6 months is going to be like all of the B2B software companies bringing out those features, taking advantage of it. Because I think there's just so much value also with each of these tools and like what data they have that can help support you. And so I think it'll be interesting to watch adoption grow as we go through it. Okay, so well, this image just makes me laugh. I think one thing that is important to talk about is while there are a lot of benefits in what we can do in all those use cases, there's also risks. And so understanding the trade-offs as you think about using AI within your team, and then also helping communicate that if you're a manager or you're kind of one on your team that's trying to understand how to use AI in your day-to-day. Really important to understand. I think there's a couple key things. ChatGPT does this thing, especially if you're using it just within this interface called hallucinations, where it'll just come up with things. Because it's still learning, and I think they're still trying to understand the balance between generating content and then from what it's learned. I'm not a technical person, but you can Google hallucinations. It does a thing where it lies. So just be cautious of that.
When you shared with me the story about the lawyer who used it to prep for a case, and the like all the stuff that it referenced was not real, was like a huge, like I knew it hallucinated, but that was like next level. And I think just double taps on the risk side of this is like, you have to fact check it sometimes, because it can blow up in your face.
Yeah. And so if you haven't heard about that, there is a lawyer that was caught when he was actually presenting to a judge in court, used ChatGPT to prep all of his materials to submit the case. And so I'm not a lawyer, but what I think they have to do is reference his previous cases. That's why they should get X, Y, or Z. And so the judge in the middle of court stopped the lawyer and says, hey, I see that you've referenced this case, and this case. Tell me more about them, because I don't know anything about them. And the lawyer did not fact check his work before he sent it in. And basically in court had to say, oh, I actually used ChatGPT and I'm not familiar with those cases. And the judge basically was like reprimanding him and putting him under watch, because basically ChatGPT made up cases to argue his case for him.
Crazy.
Just big flags, just things to think about. I think also when you're knowing that you're working with a machine learning model that's training data from across the world, know that you don't have a control over what's training on. So it could be biased, it could be inaccurate, it could be insufficient. There are some biases that still come out. So it's something to be aware of if you are reviewing or using output from ChatGPT. And then I think one of the things that every software company, every company is starting to tackle internally is anything you put into ChatGPT trains their model. And so finding the balance of proprietary information you put in there or customer information, PII information, all of those things you want to be really cognizant of and make sure your team is aware of, because ChatGPT will take that into training. And so there is a lot of companies who are starting to come out with legalese around when and how and why can you use ChatGPT internally, but just something to be cautious of. And then also, it's not a parrot, but it does do things like learn random sentences. Okay. So just combining the two, there's so much you can do. How do you balance risk versus reward? I think you guys just have to think through each piece of it. And I think in prioritizing what the team goes after, Allie sent a really good PDF before this that Gartner prepped on. It was like how sales managers can think about ChatGPT. But maybe we can also link that in this deck as we share it afterwards. But had a really good breakdown. Maybe Allie can talk about it, of like things you should look out for.
Yeah, I think it kind of talks about like a little bit about what we said on the previous slide, the hallucinations and stuff like that, like call summarization, pretty low risk, as long as you double check it. Predictive scoring, you can have a lot of risk when it comes to that because it could be making things up. But there's also the, like, do I want my sales reps spending time trying to figure out prompts in ChatGPT, or do I want them to just summarize the calls themselves? And I think that Gartner piece, it was tailored towards CSOs and like how to introduce it and know when your sales team is ready for it. I think it's a really nice summary, because a lot of the stuff that I try to use ChatGPT for is more on like the back end stuff, where like it's like, hey, find this syntax error in this god awful formula from Salesforce, or reduce the compile size because it's not processing in Salesforce. Like that's pretty low risk stuff because I'm not putting any IP in there. I'm just putting in like, random fields from our Salesforce. And if Salesforce or ChatGPT gets it wrong, like Salesforce will also tell me. So that's pretty low risk. But predictive scoring, like if you don't know the ins and outs of it and how the AI processes it and learns it, like you're potentially shooting yourself in the foot, because you have to understand what you're asking and understanding what the output is that you're getting and what you're doing with it before you can really see the value. And I think that's why that one is listed as, higher risk and strategically invest.
Yeah. And I think when you're balancing risk and reward, I think when we talked about like all the software tools that we use are going to be working on bringing more and more AI features in over the next couple of months. I think this is also where you make the case internally of like, okay, cool. Do I lean into a vendor who's built this into the day-to-day tool that I already use? Or do we try to tackle this outside in a different way? I think this kind of risk versus reward is a really helpful way to gauge how you want your team to be interacting with AI, like in ChatGPT or versus, through a software tool today. Like I use Notion's AI all the time to come up with templates. I'm like, give me a template for a webinar brief, or give me a template for blank. And like, I use that all the time, all day, every day, because it's already there. I'm already in Notion. And so I can adopt that faster. I can trust it faster. And so just things to think about in this period where I would say software is still catching up with how much generative AI has taken over the consumer side.
Yeah. And I think just to kind of like circle back to that Gartner document, a lot of it was like making sure that your end users know how to use it. And I think we talked about, making sure you're prompting it correctly. And then if you don't get the right answer, like teaching it what you want it to say, because like you said, like it learns and from its input, and you still need to validate the output. And if you don't prompt it correctly, you're never going to get the right output. And if you get frustrated with it, it's just going to keep like learning the bad habits. So making sure like before you say, hey, sales team, here's ChatGPT, here are some use cases, go a level deeper and say, here's a use case of account research. And here are some prompts that I've used to test, and these are the ones that are safe to ask it. And these are the ones you should avoid. These are the types of prompts you should avoid because it has to go into some IP or a little bit about our business or whatever that may be. But it's a super helpful doc, and I'll make sure we link it in the deck as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's interesting is when you personalize emails, I think the biggest thing we see on LinkedIn, right? Like the biggest use case for generative AI. But the reality is that we already get so many cold emails. And so it's going to do one or two things. One, you're either going to get pushed into this bucket if you just like plain use a ChatGPT email that's like, okay, this seems really cold. Or if you use it to save time and then you throw your own personal like personality on top of it, your voice, you know, you can really work with ChatGPT to learn how you write. I think there's high value there, but it's just something that you should think about. I was listening to one a webinar this morning about, you know, how if you read something from ChatGPT that hasn't been prompted, hasn't learned how you talk, it just comes off really cold and grammatical. I was like, if you want your personality to come through and we're humans and we want to make that human connection to sell better, sometimes that there is a risk there of how you come off to the customer. Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay. I think this is actually the last slide. So we've kind of talked through use cases, risks and rewards. I don't think that, sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. Jessica, I heard you can ask ChatGPT to use personas. Yes, that's actually a really good use case. From the marketing side, you can ask, like, this is a way that you can do it. You can ask ChatGPT to basically act as a certain type of persona. So we sell to revenue leaders and sales managers and sales reps. So I can say, hey, ChatGPT, could you pretend to be, you know, a CRO of this size company, et cetera, et cetera. And then I could bounce messaging off of it and it'll give me feedback, learning to be that kind of person. But yeah, really interesting way people are using ChatGPT.
And you can also ask it to, like, if you have an email typed up, say, I'm sending this to this type of persona. Can you change any language that might resonate with them better? I think the persona use case is I think it might have been one of the articles you had linked previously, but there are definitely some resources out there that can tell you how to prompt it, which I think is super valuable, prompting it the right way. And I think also from, you know, talking about the email and personalization side, like one of the things that I think makes sellers good at selling is like their personality and how they get to know the people they're selling to. Like there are some tools where I was more inclined to take the next meeting because I really vibed with the sales rep. Like, do I always end up buying it just because I vibe with the sales rep? No. But like if I mention something in a conversation, like, oh, I'm a Packers fan, or like, I'd like this type of wine, and then they reference it, or I get like, you know, a Sendosa thing that has to do with that. Like that is part of the personalization that the sales rep is just, you're never going to be able to replace that. And sales reps can be flexible and they can pivot. If, you know, we talked about something on a call and then I send you an email 30 minutes later and I'm like, hey, you know, disregarding everything I said on that call, I actually am focused on this. I chatted with my leadership team and they want to focus on this. Like the sales rep can pivot and change the body of that email to align with what new information they just got, even though the call recording was summarized and the email was already generated for them. So ChatGPT can't be as flexible as a salesperson can be. And I think that's really important. Even like you and I, LinkedIn messaging, like we vibe really well. Like I know I can understand your personality. If you had sent me a LinkedIn message that was like, hello, Allie, good morning. Like I would be like, no, who is this? Who is this person? Who is this imposter?
Who is this imposter?
Yeah. And I think also one of the things we haven't chatted about yet is like, we talked about, you know, training the sales reps, making sure they're ready for it, but also a feedback loop, not just internally, but if you are a company that is introducing a new form of AI or generative AI in your tool, and you have an alpha or a beta, or even if it's already in market, like making sure there's an avenue for your internal users and your external users to provide feedback, because this is new and like we are still figuring some things out. And without that feedback loop, you're just going to be guessing and you're going to be assuming like, oh man, my reps must love this because I'm not hearing anything, or our customers must be finding this super valuable because they're not, you know, complaining or, you know, talking about errors or whatever it may be. But you want the good stuff and you want the bad stuff, and making sure that there's a place to do that, I think is super helpful, because if you want to know what the ROI on some of these tools are going to be, I think it's going to be hard to track unless there's someone in the audience that has like a great way how they're tracking ROI for this. I think it's going to have to be anecdotal and just based on like you asking people and saying, hey, give me your feedback. What do you think about this? Is this super helpful? Because you're going to have the people that are super vocal and have big opinions about this stuff. And then you're going to have the people that are like, yeah, I use it because like my boss told me to.
There's always that. Yeah, I think that that's a good point, especially if you are building AI within your tool and also trying to use it externally within your own, your own use cases. I think because it's so new, I would say the top level thing is like make sure you're just talking about it out loud within your team. Just to share learnings. Like this is new and people are trying to understand like how best to use it, what's working, what's not working. So just create the culture within the team, whether you're a rep, whether you're a manager or in RevOps, like to talk about it. Like, hey, there's this new thing. How are we doing it? What are people excited about? What are use cases we want to try and test out and adopt? And just open the space for the conversation so people could really lean in. Because there are going to be people who are like super excited about it and really want to try it out and are an early adopter that maybe you can tap to actually go test out some use cases you want to do as a team. And then there might be people who are like, hey, I'm good with my workflow. Like you just tell me what works and then I can go try that out later. But having the conversation open and out loud just creates space within your team to feel like, hey, we want to innovate. We want to ride this wave. We want to see what works for us, and be able to actually scale with AI as it becomes more and more adopted. Because at the end of the day, like we're all going to end up adopting it one way or another. So the earlier the team can get comfortable with it, I would say is the better thing.
And they might have use cases that like I'm not thinking about because I'm not a rep that does the day-to-day job of a rep. I do the back end stuff and like process stuff. So I can have all these great ideas trying to put on my sales rep hat, but they might come up with things that I haven't thought of because I haven't been in that seat in a while. And I think that's also a really great way to get some of these newer use cases that we might not have thought about.
Yeah. Yeah. And, or like, if they have like, hey, I used AI to do this and I use AI to do this from an ops standpoint, you can think about, okay, how do I tie that all together so it's actually like automated or a flow so then the rep doesn't have to do all these individual pieces to make it work. I think there's just so much innovation and like productivity that can come by just talking about it as a team that's like the one thing that I would say is just make sure you are talking about it. And people may be like, oh, AI, roll their eyes, but just make sure you're talking about it.
Yeah, I don't know. This just made me think of that. We have a lot of Slack channels and a lot of the like information is buried in these Slack channels. And you see people going and asking the same question every like 3 months. And I'm sure it exists, but it's like, okay, taking all the juicy tidbits from Slack and summarizing it and putting it into Confluence, Notion, whatever you may use, because like there are times where someone's like, hey, I know I've asked this question before, but I can't find the answer. Can someone, surface this doc or whatever it may be. So I think the internal use cases are just as powerful as the like customer facing use cases as well.
Yeah, I agree. Mason, yes, I'll be recording and I'll share the deck afterwards. Are there any use case examples we can see? I don't have it laid out in a deck or anything like that. I don't know, Allie, if you have anything like.
I don't have anything like accessible right now, but I'm sure I've got a couple things bookmarked that actually have use cases. One for like prompts to use to tell ChatGPT for some like sales, research, and then there are some other ones too. Like I'm sure I can find some resources and put them in the deck because they're, why reinvent the wheel when there are use cases and examples out there already. So Mason, we will make sure that we include something for you.
Yeah, we'll do a resources slide at the end of the deck. Where at B2B SaaS and niche industry prospects are hard to find, have you seen a ChatGPT use case for finding new prospects? Oh, that's interesting. If you are in the call and you've also seen ways to do this, that'd be helpful to know. One way from a marketing perspective that I've been using ChatGPT is account research. And so from an ICP standpoint, I will go, hey, like I'm looking for this type of company, give me examples of type of companies that are really helpful to inspire. If you don't have a list, if you're a startup and you don't have a short list, ChatGPT can help source lists for you. That's one way. I don't know, Allie, if you have
your ICP. You mean by using your ICP and putting it in the, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think, because you could also say, it would be insane to put 10,000 accounts in ChatGPT, but as like a sales rep, I could say, here is my territory. Help me find like lookalike accounts or like, adjacent accounts in this space or like in this region or whatever it may be. But I definitely think you can use that. I think if you know your ICP, it would be easy to, as long as you follow the prompt suggestions. So you are asking it the right prompts to get the answers you want.
Yeah, I haven't tested at a contact level, Mike. Like, okay, I know at a company level, account level, it can do lookalike companies, give me lookalike companies. I don't know how good it is about being like, hey, who within this company should I go talk to? I would test it, see if it helps. But what I would probably do is like take the list out of ChatGPT, probably put it into, Sales Navigator or something, and use your normal persona route in LinkedIn to find the right contacts. But yeah, the ICP helps us at least narrow down and come up with a list of companies to go after.
Yeah, I think I've tried this out a few times, but it was like, who are the C-suites at this company, or who is the head revenue person at this company, and it'll usually find the right person. But then if you get into like the bigger enterprises where there's like 15, directors of RevOps, I think you'd have to be a little bit more specific. But I haven't dug into that as deeply, just because it wasn't as relevant to my research. But I think you could use it, or at least try.
Yeah. The other way you can use it is if you have like your ICP have a trigger event for your tool. For example, like I used to work at PagerDuty, which was a DevOps tool. So if a company had an outage, that was a great time for sales to reach out, because that's when you want to make sure your engineers are, aware of what's happening. You can use ChatGPT to say like, hey, has there any been news press about companies having big outages or websites having big outages, to help find like trigger events to go after. Or another one that I see commonly done is like press releases, like earnings or raises. If you sell to startups based on funds, having it source funds for you. Yeah. But no, I think like just even talking about this out loud is really helpful to ideate and come up with use cases. Are there any other like questions or use cases?
Any use cases from the audience that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, if you guys are doing anything that we haven't talked about, would love for you guys to share, because there's so many cool ways you could use it. Yes, what it doesn't do, ChatGPT does not do GIFs, unfortunately, but I am excited for the day, or if you know a way that you can get AI to make GIFs for you, that would be a use case I would do all the time.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else, Allie, before we round out and close out?
No, not for me. This is super fun. This was like one of the more fun webinars I think I've done.
Mainly because of the GIFs.
I mean, I wasn't going to say it, but you did.
Yeah, I mean, super fun. I just want to thank Allie for you being on the call, for everyone who's on the call and like engaging. John, you actually have a question. What AI tools do you use that have updated info beyond September 2021? That's a great question, because ChatGPT trains up to September 2021. You mentioned, for example, looking up specific contacts at companies. Actually, Allie, I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, I guess I every one that it gave me was accurate. So I guess I didn't run into the issue of like, oh, that person has already left the company. To be fair, I only did it with 20 accounts, and they were bigger accounts, so I think it was easier to find. So I do not have a tool in mind that has updated beyond September 2021. But now I'm curious, so I'm going to do some looking, and we can include that in the follow-up deck as well. I think it does cross-reference LinkedIn and some other, like, I think if you ask it about a company, it'll bring up LinkedIn, and then also any like press releases of like, oh, so-and-so was recently brought on as the CEO because of XYZ, their background or whatever it may be. But you're right, it would only go up to September 2021.
Yeah. Allie, Salesforce specific.
Ooh. So I love it for a lot of things. And like I mentioned, finding a syntax error, like I used to drive myself nuts being like, where is the missing comma or the missing parenthesis or the missing whatever? And I would have my counterpart, Eric, like look at it with me. But now I just put it into ChatGPT and it usually finds it. Or we had some really complex formulas that were daisy chained together when we were running into compile size issues. And we threw them into ChatGPT and said, reduce the compile size for the Salesforce formula. And it came up with ways to do that I would not have come up with without ChatGPT. And it saves so much time, because that is like a big part of like RevOps and being a Salesforce admin, is like making updates in Salesforce. And sometimes it's not possible. But having this resource, because I do what I call rubber ducking, which is basically like, hey, let me pick your brain. I'm going to tell you what I'm doing, and you tell me if you think I'm doing it right. And now sometimes I just use ChatGPT for that, because I don't have to bug anyone. I don't have to look at calendars. I just throw it in there. And it's been a huge time saver for me. Same with figuring out acquisitions and mergers. If I'm like looking at a LinkedIn page and I can't really figure out like, did this company recently get acquired, and it's not coming up on Google, I'll use ChatGPT. Obviously, if it's, after September 2021, it won't be as relevant, but even like the company hierarchy of like, show me Disney Pixar's hierarchy under ABC, like it's pretty good, because otherwise I'm looking at LinkedIn, I'm looking at D&B, I'm looking at a bunch of different places to see what a company hierarchy is, so I know how to piecemeal it into territories, and no one source is great. So for me has been like really awesome for me.
Yeah. And then question about Groove's AI roadmap.
Yeah, so we have something called Groove Plays, which we are beta testing right now with some customers, but it does a lot of the stuff that I've talked about, like pre-generated emails, updating the CRM. So if you go to our website there, you can request a demo and talk to any of our sales reps, or you can hit me up on LinkedIn if you're maybe not ready to talk to a sales rep yet. I'm more than happy to chat with you guys. But we've got some resources out there. We have a press release that talks about exactly what Groove Plays is from an AI perspective. And I'm more than happy to chat with anyone who's interested about that. Jesse, hit me up on LinkedIn and we can chat.
Cool. Awesome. So we'll definitely send a recording, the deck, and we'll add a slide at the end of the deck with resources to the couple of things that we mentioned. So the Gartner PDF, different prompts and use cases that you can go reference to use. But yeah, if there's any other questions, I will pass it back up to Angelica to close out.
Yes, thank you so much. And I do want to point out, Ali, I love your LinkedIn handle. I think it's so creative. Just echoing Miami's notes, I am going to be following up with everyone with the recording, the deck, any blog posts and articles mentioned on this call. And if you do have a question for both of them, I will also add their contact information on the email as well as the landing page. So stay tuned for that. We will share it before the end of the day. And I want to thank both Ali and Miami for an awesome session. And I want to thank everyone for attending and asking all your great questions. We will see you at the next event, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you,
everyone.
Happy Wednesday.